Once again, Seth Gould.
Would someone mind getting me a small piece of 1/4 inch? Because I just dropped mine.
I'm going to see if I can get a magnet
down here.
I can see it.
And I'm not going to get it out. Yeah. I don't need it right now, but in a little bit. Okay. So, where are we? We need to forge out the legs of these dividers. All right, so I have these forged as so. Hopefully everyone got a chance to look at them. Oh no, they're stuck. They always get stuck. And so I usually just have to get them apart like that. Oh, actually, before we do this, I like to take a look at them. Bring them back together. So I'm going to take a look at them right here, and I'm going to see that I'm going to look at the mass of each of the legs. And this is like talking about it before in terms of measuring from the next most precise point that you can. Is I'm looking at the mass of the legs, and if I'm off a little bit, then I can just go ahead and cut one leg a little shorter because I have them right here. I can judge the mass that, well, they look like they're about the same mass all the way down, but this one's longer, so I'm going to cut that off so that when I draw out the legs to the same length, they're going to be the same amount of material. If one looks sometimes, I don't usually, forge down here too much at this point in the forging, so it may be that, well, this one's a little thicker, but it's shorter, so it's probably the same amount of mass in there, so it'll be fine. But this, they look like they're pretty well the same. So I'll go ahead and I'll actually heat these up, this end up together, and make a mark on these so I know where to cut off that end. Sure, yeah. Stuart's asking about doing the legs and the outside calipers, how I forge these as well. So these are really very similar. I'm pretty sure I need more mass for these. I haven't made a pair of these in a while. But these ones it's exactly the same up to this point, even to the point of marking where I want that to start, especially because this was a set of measuring tools, so I wanted these all to be the same, the heads all to be the same. Mark that spot, but then for these, I forge these out to 1/4 inch, to just under 1/4 inch square, and then go round, and then I use a spring swage to make them perfectly round. So then I have then I basically have dividers with round legs, and then I rivet them together. And with a torch, I put them in the vise and clamp them right here and bend both legs out at the exact same time to get that same curve, which is so much more of a pain than you would think it would be. It's like the simplest little thing, and it would drive me nuts. And the best way I could find was put it in the vise, take a good heat, right there, and go boom, and get them to exactly the same angle, and don't go back and forth. It was just like as soon as things started cooling down, started moving to different points, and you could see. It's amazing what your eye can see, right? Who was just saying 11 thousandths out? What you can see, whether you're straightening things or anything else, your eye can pick up on such a little nuance in the difference. So anyway, do that, and then I think I had a pipe kicking around somewhere that I could put them around and form them on either side. For a while, I would form this side, form that side, say, well, that's not right, do this, do that, but it was a lot easier to just make that bend and then form them both at once around that pipe. Same thing with these jeweler saws. I made up a little jig for this bend here, because this starts, oh, thanks. This forging starts straight, and so then I made up a little jig so that I could just pop that in there and bend that around. I don't have many jigs. I have lots of, oh, thank you. I have lots of dies, swages, like open forging tools, but not too many bending tools or things like that. So now I'm just cutting that off. And now I'll take these apart. Thanks. It's just a 1/4 inch piece around. You can just cut another piece, it's fine.
It's not a tool?
It's not a tool. No, it's a 1/4 inch round stock. And I only need about.
This is a serious rescue job.
Should we call the helicopters? And I don't even need, I need like a 1/2 inch of it. I need a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch round. This isn't it.
That's not it?
No. No, it is. It is. It is.
With my hand.
So, I'm going to start drawing out. So I'm just drawing out from that mark that I gave myself. So that mark is right around, that mark's right there. I can, where it is? Oh, it's right here. Mark's right there, so I'm just starting that taper a little bit below that. Try and pretty much finish up the forging up to here. This is the pre-forging for going in the 1/2 round swage for making those 1/2 round forged legs. Bring it right up to there, and now I'll just take a heat on this little end. That's not true. I'm going to take a heat on the whole thing because actually I want it to be octagonal and a little bit tall. You'll see what I mean. So now I'm going octagonal. And where's my mark? I'm not going to bring that octagon right up to it, but close. So that's pretty rough, but that's all I need it to be. I want broken edges, not even proper octagonal. I just want to break those edges and then also squish it a little bit that way. So now this gets us to the point of ready to go into the die. So this is where I can talk about die work a little bit. This is, whoa, that got stuck quick. This is a swage that goes in the hardy or a die, and this is made by taking a chunk of steel like this and welding it to a chunk of steel like that fits my hardy hole, and then I heat it up and I have a positive of what I want my leg to look like, and I drive it into here in its 3 steps. It can't, I guess I could have done it this way and just had it be in 2 steps, and that's actually how I actually haven't used this one in a while because I've made one for my hammer, and I now do this under the hammer. And so I have a different die. Obviously it couldn't have a stem that goes under the hammer and bolts there, and I have just two grooves that complete the full leg profile. And then actually even on that power hammer die, it goes this way, so it's the full length of the rectangular die, and I have the 2 grooves in it, and then I have a matching angle of what the outside taper is as well, so that I'm able to hammer this into it and then go to that outside taper that matches just the outside and clean up that taper just a little bit. So I think die work is really, really cool, really fascinating, and I've mostly just made simple dies for this sort of work, for legs for dividers, for some, I guess the other thing that I've made most is for molding, for certain things, forging molding, pretty small molding that would frame out certain boxes and stuff like that. And I think it's great because it can get you so much closer to that finished forging that you want, or it can be your finished forging if you don't plan on doing file work like I seem to do on everything. And so I could just taper these out, square tapers, and then file that half round all around it, but this gets me a lot closer. When forging into die work, like this one in particular, I want to think about it kind of like a glass of water. I want the hot metal to hit the bottom first and fill it up. So I want that. I don't want to put a perfectly square piece of that square taper in there, because those corners are gonna drag going down, and it's gonna have a hard time fitting in there. So I basically make it so it hits the bottom of the die first, and then it stops, and as it forges out and up, it's gonna fill out that die really nicely. Okay. Going back to how I made this, I forged that positive into here, and then went ahead and that left really crisp edges on either side here. And so I feather out these edges really well, so that when I'm putting the material into here, because we're going to start right here, right where that notch is that I made, and then we're going to move over to here, and then there for that last one. I don't want there to be like a sharp edge that digs in right there. I want it to all be really smooth, just like the edge of your rounded anvil like that. You don't want to create a shut or something. And then also I find that, so if I do that, the reason I didn't go octagonal all the way to my mark is because I want there to be as much metal there to fill up that edge and make that transition nicely. If I was to go octagonal, then I found that I would get a facet on the inside of it that it wouldn't quite fill up at the top as well. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so this guy's gonna go in here like this. I'll be doing it right here. And before I do this, I am at a loss for my tools. Why? Dividers, thank you. I thought they went over there. I'll go ahead and measure these. So for production work, I just know that I'm going to go to a certain length every time, but another thing you can do is when you're making these is measure to there. Now I have that measurement. I can forge this into the die. It's going to get a little bit longer, change a little bit, but when I go forge that other half, I'll forge it to this long, and then before it goes in the die. So I now have this measurement set for the next forging. But for now, I'll put this into the die because it was still hot from the same heat when I'm not talking in my shop, even though I talk to myself, right?
So do you always do the half round profile, or?
I've done half round, I've done triangular profile. Yeah, yeah, I like the triangular ones. Those are really, I think those are nice, different, interesting. I haven't done it in a while. What have I done? No, I think I would do actually a pretty similar thing, because you got to forge a triangle. There's no great way to do it. And so, I mean, you could somehow figure out to put that forging on the diamond. Sorry, I don't know who asked that question. You could put that forging on the diamond to get it to go into that triangle and fill out really nicely. But like there'd be no great way to do that, and that transition would have to happen from the square just under the boss. So no, I'd probably do actually the same sort of forging. And in that case, no, it's not, you can't touch the bottom right away, but still you're getting it a lot closer by going octagonal. Just the bottom, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the exact same thing as this in theory. So I'm going to look for that mark. There we go. And then I can kind of screw things back up here. And especially when I'm working on the hammer, so I feel good about what this right here, that's done. This is a perfect example of now none of this has to go back in the fire. I'm just going to take my heat in here, finish that section, and then take that heat, finish that section. Especially on the power hammer when I do this, I've learned not to fear the flash. A lot of times I'll just let there be a little bit extra material, let it squeeze out and look real nasty and curvy, but that profile's all there, and the flashing is so quick to get off that it's a lot easier than fussing to try and forge that flashing back in or something. So. And if I'm still getting kind of a flat spot on the top of that half round there, then what I can do is either I can forge it this way to get it to widen and then touch the bottom of the die, or I can, if I make it a little bit longer, then it's going to end up more metal is going to end up in a shallower part of the die compared to this. Or I can move, you guys can't see this here, or I can move, say I have a flat spot right here, and that's where it lines up. I can move that forward a little bit so it's a little bit shallower and get it to fill out that way. Okay, get things straight-ish. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that looks good enough for this. So let's move on to the other side. Just bend out that leaf so that these tongs can hold it a little bit more nicely. And I'll just try and, I just need to get these to this point now.
Question,
Yes?
do you have a fire that big when you're working with these small pieces?
My fire's a little bit different in that, yeah, it's probably about the same size. Yeah,
Okay.
in short.
And do you have some way of, when you're putting the dividers in there to keep that pointed tip from getting too hot? Do you have a trick for doing that?
Nope.
Okay.
Don't burn it up. Pay attention. Don't be on Instagram. Yeah, no, it just gotta pay attention at this point, yeah. Real important on this half to be good about your heat because this is the forge welded half, right? So if I go trying to move this real aggressively when it's not nice and hot, then I'm likely to split that weld. Ooh, got away from me there. I think this is actually a great example of seeing someone screw up something and fix it, because this happens to me all the time. If something is getting a little bit weird, like this has a little bit of I just folded over a little shut. Ooh, that's scary, dangerous, it's gonna blow up on me. No, I'm just gonna take a forge welding heat and weld that shut right in and keep forging. So I can do this because this isn't tool steel. I make these out of mild steel. Yeah. I don't think so, but should it? It's all going to be hot at some point. Yeah, and actually I can see something buggered up there, and the weld's a little, I don't know if you can see it, but the weld did come apart a little bit right there, so I'm gonna have to address that. And I will flux this, take a welding heat, and just continue and be aware of it. Of course it happens in the demo. I have, yeah. For these ones, these mild steel ones, I just harden them. I just heat them up to orange and quench them and don't temper them. And that gives them a little bit of hardness for wear. I mostly shouldn't be talking right now. I'll answer you in a second. This is a time that I would wire brush because I have flux and stuff on there, and so before I go putting that into my die, I definitely want to kind of get some of that off of there. Yeah, how are we looking for length too? So we're close, and I still need to make that octagonal, and it'll probably just kind of stretch out a little bit. I've only welded tips on when I do wrought iron ones, and then I'll heat treat those tips. And yeah, it's a nice exercise. It's expensive to make them out of wrought and do the welding of the tips. It's not that much more. It's not a ton more work, but it is. I mean, it is a bit more. I would weld this tips on after this heat. No. Still kind of some flux on there. Okay. I would weld the tips on at this stage. And to do that, I would, actually can I draw this? I had a piece of chalk earlier. I don't know where it went. Do you have one? Thank you. At this point, so if we're looking at this this way, sorry. If we're looking at this way, I'd bring it to this point, and I would scarf the end of a piece of tool steel and make it the same width. And weld it right flat like that, weld it on there, jump weld it on there, and then I use a hot cut and cut it off while it's hot, and then blend it right back in and just continue the rest of the forging. And so that way, in the end, it's got the dividers. The tips of the dividers actually have the weld kind of going up into it like that, which is kind of nice. Or I'm sorry, it's the other way. They're going like this. So there's more wear on the inside, just like a plain blade. A bonus to a small shop, for all of you who have a small shop, maybe you know this, is you can be really close with all your tools. Even if I had a big shop, I'd have my anvil really close, have my vise really close. So it's literally less than a step to whatever I need. That's okay, because I make small stuff, so I don't have to be swinging things around. At this point, I can match them up with the other one by just holding the shoulders up together and see if the length is right. And this looks good to me. They're not quite as clean as I would like, but I totally know that they are workable, that they can, through filing, anything that I see in this will come out really easily. So now I'll put them back together. Usually it's good to kind of take one more heat. I find it's good to take one more heat with them together just to get them matched up again. Making sure this is nice and flat, and I really only care about what they look like up until this point, from here up. All this I don't bother straightening because I can really easily do that cold. It's a lot easier to straighten that cold than try and do it hot right now and get them to perfectly match. So I'm going to call these done. Any questions about the forgings or anything before we move on? Great. So I think while these cool down, we have an hour-ish left, right? Is that, we go till noon? Yeah, okay. Quarter till? Okay. These need to cool down before I do anything because I gotta drill a hole in them and then rivet them together. So I think let's shift gears for a minute and I'll talk about file work and get into that a little bit, talk about filing. Actually, would someone mind grabbing me a scrap? It can just be like 3/4 square out of the scrap bin. It can be anything, doesn't like a few inches long, 6 inches long, or yeah. Sure, yeah. Got it. No? Yeah? Good? No? Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. Do you guys want to pass around the die? Would that be helpful? It's just to do a little file sample on. Great. Awesome. Perfect. That's just what I was looking for. We got it in here. So let's talk about file work a little bit. So I've already mentioned that a lot of times when a forging is finished, I'll throw it in the vinegar. That kind of gets the scale off a little bit. When you're doing when you get a file in your hand, Get a new file in your hand because it's the best thing. I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by files because all they have is a pile of dull files and they don't get very far with them. But when you get a new file, you can see really how quickly and efficiently it cuts. And that's due to a few things. It's due to the new file. It's also due to a good setup. So my main bench, I'll show you a picture of it in my slideshow, but I have a nice big wooden bench that is attached to the wall, is attached to the building, and the vise is really well attached to the bench. And so there's absolutely no slop in it. This one's great. It's bolted to the floor. It doesn't have any slop in it. And what that does is that it cuts down on any vibration. And so when you're filing, that's one of the biggest things that can make poor file work or make things not work well. And whether that be in the vise and the structure itself, you'll get vibration from that, or how you've actually positioned the work in the vise that it makes it vibrate and doesn't hold well. That can affect the work really, really poorly. So yeah, I have a vise and it's set on a bench. It's a 4 3/4 inch post vise. It's at about elbow height. This is actually pretty good height. Mine's a little higher than this for me. And I want that because when I approach the vise, I want to be comfortable, just like the ergonomics at your anvil. You want to be comfortable at the vise. You want to, in a relaxed position without your shoulders too high and without having to bend way over, you want to be able to make a file stroke. I spoke earlier about constantly trying to train my eyes, and that also is train my body to know where things are. And so in particular, in the vise, I want to know where flat is. I want to know where level is. And so as much as I can is I'll put my work in the vise level, and then I will file level if I want a flat surface. If I need to make an angle, if I want to chamfer the end of this, I'm going to put it at the angle of the chamfer that I want and file flat. In this way, I'm always bringing myself back. This stays constant as much as I can. It always stays flat, and then I change my work. I move the work a lot in the vise to put it in the position that's going to best suit what I'm trying to do. The vise should, if I'm going to file the end of this, I am not going to put it in the vise like this. This is so much vibration. You hear that squealing? That's all because this is sticking out of here and going like that. And so I'm going to put this absolutely as low as I can down into the vise to avoid vibration. And you can hear the sound of a good file cut. You shouldn't hear any chatter or squealing. Sometimes it's unavoidable when you're dealing with a forged piece that has a sheet metal end coming off of it and it's going, but yeah, that's the best you can do. So let's clean up the face of this a little bit. We're just going to make a little sample of different kinds of decoration. And this has mill scale on it, which is super hard. It's just like the oxide that forms when you're forging, and that can dull the file really quickly. And so if I'm filing something that has scale on it, then I have a couple files that are a little bit far gone, or I'll use the file up on edge. So this is a 12-inch square bastard cut file, and I'll use it up on the corners to help bust through that scale. Use my scale buster. Can you guys, how's this look for you? How well can you see this? Okay? Kind of okay? And I might go in two directions. So I'm always, this hand is doing has all the power, this hand is doing the driving. It's helping support and tell me what angle the file should be at. So sometimes I go at different angles to kind of help bust that up. Once I get the scale off of there, then I can go to town and get that surface nice and smooth. So if it's all right with everyone, I'm gonna hold this up a lot because I think it's kind of important to see the light. Is this gonna screw you guys up? Probably. You can see the way that the light reflects off of it. And I'm looking at the light a lot. I'm looking at how that's gonna tell me how flat the piece is. And I think that's a big part of successful file work. Not that every filed thing needs to be perfectly flat, but it's the way that the light reflects off of it. And so if you have a piece that's rounded, that's like these half rounds, I'll show you, I like the light to reflect off in bunches of little facets and little flats. If it just kind of all curves over and the file marks are crisscrossing and everything, you get muddled light coming off of it. And so that's one way that you can really enhance the file work. So I'm constantly looking at that, and much like you watch your hammer blows to see if you're making dents in your metal, if you need to adjust your hand, I'm looking at how the file is cutting, and that's going to tell me how I need to adjust to make sure that I'm getting a nice flat surface. So that's just some files come in different cuts. There's bastard cut, or coarse cut is the coarsest cut, and that's a double cut file, so that means there's a chisel went in this direction and then a chisel went in this direction to raise those burrs. So there's two cuts, it's double cut. A single cut or a mill cut file or a fine cut file is going to have just a single chisel mark. You can vary the file fineness of cut by both the number of cuts, a single cut or double cut, and also the size of the file. So these are both bastard cut files, but this is a 14-inch and this is a 6-inch, and this is a much finer cut than this one. Okay.
Do you have a preferred file manufacturer, or is it just anything that's new is better than a rusty old file?
No, quite the opposite. A rusty old file might be better than a new file. Ideally I find new old stock files that were made in the United States that no longer, like Nicholson no longer makes files in the United States. So if you see a Nicholson that says made in the USA, that's an older file that's probably a little bit better manufactured. The quality of the file's a little bit nicer. So I look for old files a lot, yeah. I will buy new files, and when I teach classes, we just order them from McMaster Carr. They're usually Nicholson. They're great. A new file, so I should say that yes, a new file is better than nothing, than a really rusty old bad one. But when you get into it and you're using a lot, I find there's a little bit more life out of them, and there's some certain parts of them, like where the teeth are cut, that is actually better on the older ones. So now I have well, this is actually a fine double cut file, but or no, this is single cut. Sorry, this is a single cut file. So I have a nice flat surface on there. A way to get a really clean, even surface is through draw filing. And so I'm going to stand. So I'm left-handed. So as I file regularly, I have this in my hand. I'm moving forward like that. Draw filing, I'm going to turn to the work, turn my hand like this, and I'm cutting on the back stroke here. The file only cuts in one direction. When you're facing, you cut away from you. With draw filing, if it's in your left hand, you cut like that. And what I'm doing is I'm putting really nice, even, fine, smooth marks on this.
Does that work with any cut of file?
Yep, you can draw file with any. I could draw file with that 14-inch bastard cut file, and it would be a much coarser draw file surface. But I'm showing you this because I want to show you how fine of a surface I can get just from pretty quick filing. So there's still a few marks left in there, so you can kind of see, or I can just go ahead and do this. So you can see the transition between, what's best for you guys to see this?
Put right on the vice.
Put it just like that. Okay. So you can see the way the light shines off it and how smooth this is and how even and nice this is. Okay? So that's like a kind of a finished surface that I use for a lot of stuff, is draw file whenever I can. You can't do it so well on curved things or like that, but on any, like a spatula handle, or you'll now start to look at my work and look for those file marks and how they're done, and you'll see that on a pair of finished dividers, you can see that nice draw file finish on the head of those dividers going one direction, and then the ornamentation is going in the other direction. And that change in light and reflection is what makes it look different, as well as the form. In looking at file work, maybe I'll draw on this for a second. In looking at file work, I kind of consider it, most files are either square, they either have a flat surface, a rounded surface, or there's triangular files. There's lots of different kinds of files, but for the most part, I'm just using round, half round, or flat files. And so with those shapes, I kind of consider decorative file work to be done in a series of interior coves. So if this is our piece, a cove like that that gets cut in, or a bead, so something that is like a bead. So you can imagine that could be all the way, these could be fully three-dimensional, or it could just be on the decorative edge, but these are ways to add ornamentation, and you can combine them in a lot of different ways. So let me do a couple of these for you to see. So let's just do a quick, we'll do something on the edge. I'm going to draw file this back a little bit more.
So you're pushing the pressure on the file in both directions?
Nope, I only put pressure on the file on the backward stroke. That's the cutting stroke. In the same way, you can hear it skating back over, but it's essentially just registering. So, sorry, I don't know who was asking that question. I was looking at.
Especially on a regular file stroke, how much are you worried about the back drag dulling your file?
I don't. I mean, I don't put pressure on it, but I also don't like lift up every time. I don't know if it actually does dull the file or not. There's some, I read in a, it was an old machinist handbook, I think, and there was a whole section on filing, and it said something like a file is broken into its prime after 10,000 file strokes. I don't know how long it lasts after that, and I don't know what that even means, but I guess maybe there's a theory behind that. So it's like, maybe, you know, those teeth need to break in a little bit. I mean, I like just using a brand new file. I don't know how fast I get to 10,000 file strokes. That would be interesting.
That direction of when you're filing, that changes if you put it in your right hand?
This is a question that's totally plagued me. And I don't, no, it doesn't feel like it does to me. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has experience with this or what they think, but. So let's use I use this 6-inch half round for a lot of decorative work. So right now I'm going to go in and do a cove. And here I am, you can hear I am lifting up and coming back. I don't know, it's kind of, I think when I do this, I'm being a little bit more careful and intentional in terms of, and picking it up so I can see what's going on there, so I can make adjustments if I need. And then once I get it established, I'm doing the same thing. So I could, and I know I just said to you, put it level. So I could do that, and that could be better. But when I get into this decoration like this, I'll tend to leave it horizontal, and then adjust my angle accordingly. And in the same way, I'm looking at how the light is reflecting off of it, so that it's not got facets like boom, 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 boom. I want it to be one even file stroke. So that's that cove in there, just one edge. And then I'll do a bead right next to it. And I can do this also with the half round, but I plunge in with the corner of it. I start really easily because the teeth are somewhat fragile on the edge. So I start there, and then however big I want my bead to be, I'll start on the other side, and then bring the two up to meet in the middle. So now I have the two outliers, and I'll start to roll over to get them to meet. Okay, so that's kind of that bead right next to it. And then I can do the exact same thing, but doing it fully, a full three-dimensional one. So now, we'll start with the cove here. And different radiuses of files will give you different effects. And I'm trying to, I don't want to bore you with this because I could do this all day. But I'm trying to just kind of give a little bit of a crash course into this so that hopefully I'm planning on doing a little bit of work on, like hoping to finish this pair of dividers while we're here. And so if you check in and see what I'm doing, you'll have a little bit of understanding of the language of how I'm approaching it and why I'm doing it. So I'm picking up to look at what's going on. Okay, so there's that cove. Da-da-da. Let's do a bead next to that. And so same thing, I'm plunging in close to it. And this is the fun point where you start going across and making those ornamentations, and then you skate your file right across that beautiful draw filed surface. And then you have to redraw file it and readjust things, and it is what it is. I'm starting to lay down, you know, dig that a little deeper and lay it down, you know. Okay, so there's that full, you know, full three-dimensional cove and bead. And then I'm doing the same thing. Actually, I like an even finer file for this. So this is a smooth cut 6-inch file. So it's a single cut file. It's a little bit finer. The teeth are on the edge. And if I'm going to do just line work, then this is really nice for that. So I can just put in a line here, a line there to kind of trap that, frame it out.
Seth, do you typically start on the edge ornamentation and then do the large flat?
Well, so it depends on the piece. It totally depends on the piece. I can just tell you that on these dividers, my order of operations is always that and this is a good segue into this, is that, I don't know if I'll get to this in front of you guys, but the next thing that happens after the forging is I drill the hole. Well, usually I clean up the faces just a little bit, roughly. I drill the hole, I rivet it, and then I clean up the profile of the head of the dividers. So that's always the first thing that I do is in filing anything, is I always clean up the profile of whatever it is. I never start looking at the face and start cleaning up the faces and putting in ornamentation. Always clean up the profile, make sure that looks good. And then, so on this, clean up that profile, then I do the legs, and then I go in and I do the head, I do that edge ornamentation there, and then I put the lines in, and then I do the edge ornamentation in between the lines.
How do you deal with file loading?
With file loading?
Yeah.
So I think that mostly comes from too much pressure while filing. So if I'm getting, so the question was, well, how do I deal with file loading, right? Is that you can get chips. So as you're filing, the little chips are coming off, swarfs coming off, and those are getting work hardened as they're coming off, because it's just like any other chip coming off of a piece of metal. And so they can get either embedded in the file, so they can get embedded in the file, and then when you go to continue to file, then you have these work hardened chips sticking out of the teeth that are then making different scratches into the metal. And that's how sometimes you'll see there'll be like a deeper scratch even in the draw filing. And so, yeah, I think that can come from too much pressure. So if I see that happening, I'll back off my pressure filing. But also you just need to clean that out. I actually don't own a file card. I just have a wooden bench that I whack the file on it every time I put it down, pretty much. I file, whack, put it down, pick up another file. That gets some of that stuff out of there. Or I just have a little piece of brass tubing that I've flattened on the end that I just pick a piece out. So it's usually, if you're getting a lot of file loading, then something's going wrong, and I'm guessing it's because you're pushing too hard. Also along those lines is if you're filing and it sounds like glass or it feels like you're sliding across it, that's because the piece that you're filing is filing your file. There's something in that piece of metal, whether it's a hard spot or something like that, or it could be that scale that's actually cutting. So this is a file I've used for a while, and you can see the stripes on it. That's from hard spots, and that just kind of happens over time. And so try and be diligent about that. But that's the dulling of the teeth, is when you see those stripes. It's a hard spot. And either you have to go back and anneal your piece again, or sometimes you can just kind of bring it up through the temper colors and that will soften it enough. Or you might have to grind through that if it's in a situation that you can do that.
Do you use any resharpened files?
Sorry,
Resharpened files? Do you use any?
I have never used a resharpened file. I have a pile of dull files from over the years that I've been meaning to send to a place in California, I think, that resharpens files, but no, I have not. There's one in Ohio? Okay, yeah, I haven't used it. Do you have experience with that?
I do.
Yeah?
I resharpen all my Farrier racks.
Oh, awesome. And do you get how many
Well,
sharpenings?
It's economical as far as the resharpening. I think they're like $7 to resharpen.
Sure, okay.
But when they come back more like a broken rasp versus a brand new
Okay,
rasp.
okay.
And a lot of guys now, there's a fella in England who's selling a resharpening kit that a lot of people buy and set on their bench at home.
Hmm.
Basically what you're doing is you're sharpening the back side of those teeth and knocking off the burr edge just as if you would
Hmm.
a drill bit or a knife or whatever,
Hmm.
sharpening the back of each one of those teeth. Just
Yeah.
kind of more or less a buffing whip.
Yeah, oh, interesting. Yeah, so I don't have experience with it, but I should. I should probably stop, just keep buying boxes of files. Let's see, anything else? So we can start to look at some of this work and see, maybe where I've utilized these different things, where there's different, like this is a full bead that's filed in there, and then these are just big chamfers that I've put in there in the same way. And I think file work is also really successful when you're enhancing the form. So like with this in particular, because this in profile, it comes up and out like that, I wouldn't have put a bead on that's curving that way. That would be counterintuitive in my mind. So you're kind of like, by putting a facet onto an already curving piece, then you're kind of enhancing that profile. And then you're making the flat of it look even thinner than the body of it. And so you can start to play with the lines. So then you really start to look at not only the profiles, but the profiles, the silhouettes of both the entire piece and the silhouette of the chamfer or the line where that meets the chamfer. And I think that all gets really interesting. Yeah.
So that's why it was mostly filed.
This? Yes. Oh yeah. Yep. No, this bead here was totally filed in. This was a mass on the end that was a cylinder that I filed in. Yeah.
Is that what you like about the file work? Is that eye trickery that you're creating?
I like it because and I don't mean refinement in something as less refined, but it puts a different level of refinement to the piece. Like I think really well refined forgings are beautiful, but I also really enjoy filing for one. And I think it allows me to put different details in and create different shapes that you wouldn't be able to necessarily forge. You can do a lot with complicated die forging and things like that, but you could never forge those little, these little wings in or things like that. So yeah, I like the kind of next level of detail that it gives. I think things can look overly filed. I think that things can have just like, okay, so this is just my preference, but like this pair right here of dividers, of calipers has this file decoration on it, which is done by using just small round file and then a half round file on edge on the peaks. Okay, so you file all the round in, and then you use a half round on edge and put lines in it, and it creates this kind of scallop texture. I think that I really like it in this one spot. If I had it all over this whole edge, I think it would feel way over the top. And so it's kind of also just adding little bits in here and there. I try and find a balance between over ornamentation and and not, which is interesting. That kind of gets to another point, is I've always been really interested in ornamental work and very highly ornamented work, but in my own aesthetics, I tend to try and be more reserved about it. Even though, I don't know, you guys are probably saying like, ooh, that's way, like, that's over the top, but I don't know, I'm trying to strike a balance between it, between simple lines with maybe a little flourish here or there.
Do you ever use sandpaper?
Yeah, sure, I will. Like sometimes I'll just use it right at the end to hit it and clean it up, or like I have sanding sponges that kind of make things a little bit nicer and brighter, or to hit off, or to knock off a burr or things. But I don't, I hate sanding, and so I really like that. No, sanding's terrible, oh my God. I'd do anything but sand. And so I really, that's kind of an answer to your question as well, is that I like filing because you get that refinement, but you don't have to sand. Like, I really like the filed finish, and I think it's interesting, you know? I think, yeah.
Do you use a belt grinder?
No. Yes, I own a Wilton belt grinder, 2x72 belts. I use it all the time, yeah. Yep, And I'll use that for, I like the challenge, and I think it's really efficient to be able to forge things as close to the finished product as possible. But very often, the first thing I'll do with these forged pair dividers is take them and hit them against the face of the belt grinder to get a quick flat surface that I can then center punch and drill through. You know, that's like one use of it. But I don't usually try and rough everything out first. So it's both it's not like I'm not against it by any means, but I would also much rather stand at my bench and vise with a file in my hand than stand at my belt grinder with a dust mask and ear protection and eye protection and stuff. So it's also just like what I choose to do in the shop, and a lot for me in the shop, which I'm fortunate to be able to do this, I'm fully aware of that, is that I'm doing things that I enjoy doing, and luckily that's producing a result that people seem to like, and I'm able to sell my work. But a lot of the choices I make is because it's a way that I enjoy working. I'm not always a means to an end sort of person, for better or worse. But with that said as well, I think you can be really fast at this type of work if you have a good setup and that you can get efficient at it. So, okay, we still have plenty of time, don't we? Would it be better to see the dividers get riveted together right now, or yeah? Sure, okay, let's do that then, and then maybe there'll be a little bit of time left and we'll do something.
Wait a minute, what was the other choice?
Oh, oh yeah, sorry. Or
something else.
Or something else, or nothing. Well, I'd like to maybe show some quick engraving too, but I can do that later. I think we'll have time to do both. Yeah, let me rivet these together.
Whatever you feel like doing, that'll be
Okay. Well, I think it might be nice to see these go together.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly, well, I'm gonna file the scale off these. I'll pass this around. I'm gonna just hit the scale off the faces of these real quick. Kind of curved. Ooh, this has hard scale on it. I usually get more of a workout from filing than forging. Okay, that's enough. Just to kind of give me a surface to see what I'm looking at. And I'm going to measure this out super well. Just kidding. That's all I need. It doesn't need to be perfectly in the middle. I'm looking at this center line and where it goes down here and just eyeballing that center point, kind of looking at the leaves that I have, making sure top to bottom it's about in the middle that way, side to side. Oh, my voice just got really hoarse. I'm going to drill a hole in it. Excuse me. Sorry. So now we can use that really important piece of 1/4 inch round. Whoop. I'm just kind of rounding off the end of this. And I've drilled this hole a little bit under 1/4 inch. I usually use a letter drill. I can't remember what it is, but the letter drill that is under 1/4 inch. And that way I can not fit this through there. But I'm going to start and taking a tapered reamer to taper out the side of both holes.
Try to do an hourglass shape.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so when this meets in the middle and makes a 1/4 inch, and when this meets in the middle and starts to open up, as soon as the 1/4 inch fits through it, then I know that it's in the right spot, and then I'll have an hourglass shaped hole. And I try and do either side equally. I think this drill bit's a little bit smaller than I usually use, so it might take a minute more. I can usually do it in 20 turns per side. Yeah, this will take a second. But who's counting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are getting hot. Yeah, this thing isn't even close. You guys wanted to see it. You chose it. You didn't want to see the other thing. So I've one advantage, no. Yes and no. I've made center punches mostly with round tips or with square tips, and the square tipped ones, the ones that look like a pyramid, they're nice because if you ever need to do any layout and you're going to heat up the material and scale, and the metal is going to scale, then the scale happens in round forms organically, and so you can see that square center punch mark within the scale. So it's nice for hot work like that. This one, I've just started making these. I actually just made these 3 to be here for sale. And I just really liked, I kind of figured out that they'd grind really well if you did it on all the facets and it went the opposite direction. So I was planning on doing them round, but they actually turned out really, I don't know, I like the way they look this way. Well, I'm this far into it. I don't mind doing a little handwork. Yeah, no, I don't. That was a fractional drill that was, I think that was a 7/32, so it's kind of a bit. Is there a hacksaw around? I think I saw one hanging on the wall. Oh, look at that. Woo! Happy New Year. So at this point, I usually will check them like this right now and see if there's any like real, thank you so much, if there's any like real high spot or tight spot on these. I am just going to hit, so now that I can still take them apart, I'm just going to hit those insides right here for what will be the bearing face. Woo. And this is one of those situations that, you know, it's not, you got parts sticking out, it's hard to get it to knot. And I can see by this, you know, you can see that low spot real easily right there. And so I think I am going to go ahead and go through that a little bit more, just in case. I mean, the squeezing of the rivet is mostly just going to happen right around the top there. But it's good to clean it up a little bit. Okay. Well, sorry to keep making someone get up. Is there a small hammer? Not as small as I have. A medium small hammer? Like a small, like a riveting size hammer, maybe half a pound. Perfect. Ooh, love it. Yeah. So I just look down at this. I just have this hanging on here. I look down, and I'm leaving less than 1/8 of an inch coming out both sides. It's going to be it needs to fill up that hourglass area, but it's going to be flush. You really don't need hardly any material. Whoa, what happened? Now I'll just start to, I usually just put it right down on the anvil. I don't shim it up or anything for the perfect amount. I just start to hammer that head over, and then I flip it over. Start to upset those. And it's going to start to catch. And if there's one side sticking out a little bit more, I can just knock it back through. And as it starts to catch, I start to work that joint. And what you don't want is you don't want to hit this too hard and upset it, because if you hit it too hard, the energy is going to move through the rivet, and it's going to meet in the center, and it's going to push out the middle of that rivet. And then you're going to bind the rivet in the middle leaf. What you want is you want to upset it until it starts catching the outside leaves and pushing those in, so that the rivet stays bound to the outside leaves and moves with them, so that when you move those dividers, you don't see a moving pin. I guess that could be a different style. I don't think it would work terribly well, but. And then at this point, before I get too far here, I clean up the profile of the outside. And that's good, because right now I have some drag coming from the outside of that, so now I'll clean up that profile. And this has a nice built-in profile gauge on it. You guys didn't even see me make it, did you? It's got a nice built-in profile gauge because you can just file the high spots down to themselves and then move it, and then file the new spots down to themselves, and file it and move the new spots down themselves, and it'll naturally start to round itself out because you're just always taking those high spots away. Sometimes you can, if it's bad, you can change direction, file it a little bit different direction. So see, I just filed that high spot down, sorry. I just filed that high spot down, and now I go to move it, whoop, there's another high spot. And so you can just keep moving it round and round and round, and you'll get there. And so it will depend on how well you did put that rivet in the center too, though. So if you're way off to one side, then it's going to make it nice and round off to one side because it's all around the rivet pivot. The rivet pivot. And it's nice because you can see it as soon as it touches that next, the next metal that it isn't filing. It makes a bright spot, and you know you're there. You can move on. Well, I think you guys get the idea. I don't think you need to watch me do all this, but you can see already it's already rounding out pretty quickly. And so I'll just continue to do that and also be paying attention to the overall form of it. And then continue to clean up the sides, the legs, and do the finished file work. After I finish cleaning this up, I will finish setting the rivet. So I'll just continue to work it. Sometimes I put some oil in there, get it working that way. And then set that rivet in there, file it flush, feel good about the joint, and move on to the rest of the work.
What's your time frame on these?
2 hours, usually less.
Start to finish?
Yep.
Is that the forging and filing?
Everything, yeah. I aim for an hour and 45 minutes for all of it, yeah. So, that's as good as I can do. What's that?
Do you scrape the hammer handles smooth, or do you?
I usually use, these ones, yes. I will, it depends on which ones. The ones I have here, I think I did scrape them, yeah. Actually, no, maybe not that one, but the new hammers that I make, they definitely have scraped handles, the bench ones. Yeah, I really like scraping to finish, yeah. I got a spoke shave from Caleb James, who's a plane maker. Beautiful spoke shave, and I've been using that, and it is a joy to use, and then I usually and then scrape to finish. Yeah.
Can you explain what straight finish means?
Yeah, it's just using a card. So it's essentially a piece of sheet metal that's made out of tool steel, and you take a burnisher and you burnish so that you create a burr on the edge of it, and then you're actually using that sheet card. If it was like this, usually they're bigger than this, and I was finishing something in here, then you can bend that piece of sheet metal with the burr on it and scrape, and it leaves a really nice finish. Yeah, it's a nice way of forming, and you don't. Yeah. Right. Well, I guess we're out of time. Okay. Well, that's it.